For more than a decade, they've been the two biggest rivals in tech, period. You have Apple, the fortress of privacy, and you have Google, the absolute king of data. One built this perfect walled garden to keep you safe and in their world. The other built an open empire to learn, well, everything about you. But in a move that has absolutely rocked the industry, these two titans have struck a secret deal. Apple is about to perform a brain transplant on Siri, and the donor? It's Google. This isn't just an update, people. This is a deal that is going to change the iPhone as we know it, and it all boils down to one huge question.
I mean, really think about it. Why would Apple, a company that has built its entire brand, its entire identity on protecting your data and controlling every little piece of its own universe, hand over the keys to Siri's brain to the one company that knows more about us than anyone else? It feels like a paradox, right? A complete 180 on everything they stand for. But as we're about to see, this is an incredibly calculated billion-dollar gamble. It's born out of desperation, some brilliant engineering, and a quiet crisis that's been brewing inside your iPhone for years now. All right, so here's how we're going to break this whole thing down. First, we'll look at the history of this pretty unlikely alliance. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of Siri's billion-dollar upgrade. After that, we'll explore how Apple is planning to use Google's brain, but, and this is key, enforce its own rules. Then we'll get to the fun part, what this actually means for you and your iPhone. And finally, we'll zoom out and see how this deal completely changes the new AI world order.
Okay, first up, an unlikely alliance. You know, to really get how wild this is, you have to remember who we're talking about here. For years, Apple versus Google has been the defining battle in technology.
This slide really just nails their opposing worldviews. On one side, you've got Apple. They're all about meticulous control. They make the hardware, they write the software, they run the App Store. Their whole thing is a walled garden, built on this promise of privacy. And then on the other side of the ring, you have Google. Their whole philosophy is open, it's data-driven, and it's all built around Android, the iPhone's biggest rival. I mean, these aren't just business strategies. They're basically different religions. So what on earth could possibly bring them together? Well, a shared problem. And that problem, as literally anyone who has used an iPhone in the last 5 years knows, is Siri. Let's be honest, despite having this huge head start, Siri went from being this revolutionary new feature to, well, kind of a running joke. It fell so far behind competitors like Google Assistant and this new wave of AI from places like OpenAI. The frustration was real, and for a company like Apple that's obsessed with user experience, it was just an unacceptable failure. Siri was just stuck. It was having a total midlife crisis. It couldn't hold a real conversation. You'd ask a follow-up question, and it had already forgotten what you were talking about. It was so rigid, only understanding specific keywords, and forget about anything complex like a multi-step command. It couldn't handle real-time info, and its reasoning skills were pretty much zero. Apple knew they couldn't just patch Siri. They needed to perform a lobotomy. And they knew they couldn't wait years to build a new brain from the ground up. Which brings us to our second section, Siri's billion-dollar upgrade. So Apple's staring at this massive AI intelligence gap, and they make this incredibly pragmatic and very un-Apple-like decision. If you can't build it fast enough, you buy it. Or, in this case, you license it from your biggest rival. And they are paying a very, very hefty price. We're hearing the deal is worth around $1 billion a year. But here's the crazy part that actually makes it all make sense. Apple and Google already have this massive financial relationship. Google pays Apple over $20 billion a year just to be the default search engine in Safari. So when you look at it that way, adding another billion for AI is almost a rounding error, and it just builds on a partnership that's already there. It's a surprisingly logical move.
So what is Apple actually getting for all that cash? Well, this slide just lays it out perfectly. It shows you the sheer scale of this upgrade. The old Apple AI model, it had around 150 billion parameters, and you can think of parameters as the knobs and dials an AI uses to think. Now, look at the custom Gemini model Apple is licensing. It has 1.2 trillion parameters. That's an 8-fold jump in pure computational muscle. This is not just a bigger engine, it's a completely different kind of machine. So this is the main thing I really want you to get. We have to stop thinking about this as just another software update. It's not. It's a brain transplant. Google's Gemini model isn't just some feature they're tacking on. It's becoming the new foundational logic for Apple Intelligence. It's going to handle the core reasoning and planning that the old Siri could only dream about. But that, of course, brings up that billion-dollar privacy question. And that brings us right to our third section. Google's brain, Apple's rules. How in the world Can Apple let a Google AI into the iPhone without completely torching its privacy-first promise to all of us? Well, the answer is a pretty groundbreaking piece of tech. It's called Private Cloud Compute, or PCC, and you have to understand this to see how this whole deal is even possible. Think of PCC as a super fortified extension of your iPhone's security, but it lives in the cloud. It's a set of highly secure servers running on Apple's own chips, and it's designed to do one thing: handle these complex AI tasks without ever storing your data or making it visible to anyone, and that includes Apple itself. So, here's how it works in practice. You ask Siri a really complex question. If your phone can't handle it by itself, the request gets sent to Apple's PCC servers. And it's here inside Apple's own secure digital fortress that the custom Gemini model does its thing. The answer is then sent back to your device, and here's the most important part. Your personal data is never visible to Google. It's never accessible to Google. It's kind of perfect. Apple is basically renting Google's brain, but they're keeping it locked up tight inside Apple's house, playing by Apple's rules. And you better believe Apple negotiated some very strict conditions. First, the whole thing is white labeled. That means you'll never see a Powered by Google logo. To you, it will just feel like a much, much smarter Siri. Second, Apple is the absolute gatekeeper. They decide what queries stay on your device and what needs the power of the cloud model. And third, and this is so important, the deal is non-exclusive. This gives Apple the freedom to swap out Gemini for another model or even their own down the road. They're buying time, not giving up control. So, we've talked about the rivalry, the money, and the privacy. Now let's get to the good stuff. Our fourth section, your iPhone's new smarts. What is this new supercharged Siri actually going to be able to do for you?
I think this quote from a Reddit user just perfectly captures the years of frustration we have all felt. The bar for success here is, in some ways, so incredibly low. Just doing the basic stuff right would feel like a revolution. But what Apple is promising goes way beyond just playing the right song.
So say hello to the new Siri. First, you get deep conversational reasoning. It can finally understand context and handle follow-up questions. You can ask about a flight, then say, "What's the weather like there?" and it will actually know what "there" means. It can handle complex, multi-step commands like, "Find my vacation photos from last summer, create a collage and send it to mom." It will have on-screen awareness, meaning it knows what you're looking at in an app. And it will finally tap into your own personal context, pulling flight info from your mail or dinner reservations from messages to answer questions proactively. It's a total game changer. So when can you actually get this? Well, the public preview is expected at Apple's big developer conference in 2026. The actual Gemini-powered series should start rolling out in the spring of 2026, probably with iOS 26.4. But make no mistake, Apple is still playing the long game here. They're still working hard on their own in-house models, codenamed Ferret 3, with the ultimate goal of eventually replacing Gemini. All right, let's zoom out one last time for our final section, the new AI world order. Because this partnership, it isn't just about Apple and Google. It's a huge shift that completely redefines the competitive landscape for artificial intelligence. This table lays out the new reality perfectly. The AI race isn't about dozens of startups anymore. It's consolidating around these massive alliances. You've got Microsoft and OpenAI running on the Azure cloud. You've got Amazon backing Anthropic running on AWS. And now you have the blockbuster team-up of Apple and Google with that unique twist of Gemini's AI running inside Apple's own private cloud compute system. The ripple effects from this are just huge. I mean, this deal makes Google's position so much stronger, with its Gemini AI now powering features across both Android and iOS. For Apple, it's this rare kind of humbling admission that they needed help from a rival to stay in the game. It puts immense pressure on smaller AI startups. It's going to be way harder for them to land these big platform deals. But on the bright side, Apple's privacy-first approach here could set a whole new standard for the industry. But this new world order isn't without its own set of problems. The European Union's Digital Markets Act, the DMA, is already throwing a wrench in the works. Apple has already said that because of the DMA's rules, the rollout of some of these new Apple Intelligence features, including the new Siri, is being delayed in Europe. It just goes to show you how these regulatory battles are going to shape the future of AI everywhere. And so that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Is this partnership the kind of collaboration we need to finally accelerate true innovation and give us the smart assistants we've always wanted? Or is this the final move in a giant chess game that puts the entire future of AI into the hands of just 3 or 4 huge companies, effectively closing the door on everyone else?
You know, the answer to that question is probably going to define the next decade of technology, and we'll be here to break down every single twist and turn. If you want to stay ahead of these huge shifts that are shaping our world, make sure you like this explainer and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives just like this one. Thanks so much for watching.